Welcome to this special edition of Hannity, the Trump Doctrine. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle in for Sean tonight. President Trump is showing the world what leading from the front looks like by taking a very different approach to foreign policy than the Obama administration. Tonight for the hour, we'll explain how the Trump Doctrine is starting to take shape and what it means both here at home and abroad. The Commander-in-Chief's foreign policy moves have dominated the headlines by drawing a line in the sand with Syria over chemical weapons, calling out Russia, taking a tough stance with North Korea, and by dropping the, quote, mother of all bombs on ISIS. Let's take a look.
Frankly, Putin is backing a person that's truly an evil person.
The barbaric killing of small and helpless children and babies must be forcefully rejected by any nation that values human life. We have a very big problem in North Korea. I really think that China is going to try very hard and has already started. We'll see what happens. We will be effective, I can promise you that.
Our actions with respect to the missile launches is not tolerable.
Fox News can confirm now that the U.S. has dropped a large bomb in eastern Afghanistan.
We targeted a system of tunnels and caves that ISIS fighters use to move around freely.
We have incredible leaders in the military, and we have incredible military, and we are very proud of them. And this was another very, very successful mission.
We have changed the geopolitical reality in the world in just a matter of weeks.
Somebody said, oh, Trump's not going to build the wall. I'm going to build the wall 100%. People aren't even trying to get through anymore because they know they can't.
This is a new era. This is the Trump era.
So what do President Trump's bold and decisive foreign policy actions mean going forward? Joining us now is Fox News military analyst, retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, thanks for being with us tonight. Indeed, quite a busy week, especially as it relates to U.S. foreign policy, national security, and a number of different geopolitical fronts. What do you think now, if you can compare and contrast for us the juxtaposition from President Trump's approach to foreign policy and how it differs from the previous administration?
Yeah, we're seeing a dramatic change here. President Obama and President Trump are facing the same global security challenges that are on a scale we have not seen since the end of World War II and the rise of the Soviet Union. President Trump has definitely made a statement that he wants America to exercise global leadership, and he is acting decisively and responsibly with a moral underpinning to it. And I'm absolutely convinced he's come to the conclusion when America is exercising this global leadership, the world and America is a safer place. And when that leadership is weak, as it was during these last 8 years, in my view, and when we disengage from the world, we embolden our adversaries and we weaken the relationship with our allies to the point that they start making bad decisions. President Trump has spent the first 84 days reassuring our allies around the world, in Europe, in the Far East, in the Middle East, that the United States intends to exercise its responsible leadership role in the world. And that is great news for our country and also for our allies out there.
And what does it mean to you, personally, and for the military people that you speak to, that this president is allowing them to act and engage, giving them the support that they need, especially in the field?
Yeah, that is the way it normally is. And the last 8 years, it was not that way. Recall, 3 Secretary of Defenses all had challenges with President Obama in the execution of their duties. Secretary Gates, Secretary Panetta, and Secretary Hagel was fired over it. The issues were the same: micromanaging the military. What President Trump has said, listen, when we're involved in conflict operations in Iraq, in Afghanistan, other places where we're already there, already committed, what you do with your forces are your decisions. How you use air power is your decisions. How you maneuver forces, those are your decisions. You don't need to get our permission, and we're certainly not going to second guess those decisions. What the result of that Kimberly, is that we actually make better decisions, and the fact is the forces are more effective because they can adapt to an enemy that is changing as the days go by. And when you're able to do that and you don't have to ask permission, we're very responsive in getting on top of that enemy. So all of those leaders out there truly applaud that decision to give them the authority and the responsibility to exercise their duties. They love what's happening here.
Yeah, and we saw that just, this week now with Afghanistan. And get your reflections on the decision to use that bomb and the area that they used it in. It seems to me this was a smart move strategically too, and also a little bit of a wake-up call to Pakistan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Listen, what we were doing there, this is ISIS, the Khorasan group in Afghanistan. There was several hundred in a safe haven in caves there, bona fide safe haven. A major lesson we learned out of 9/11, we permitted the Al-Qaeda to have a safe haven, by the way, not too far from where the strike was, for a number of years. And by permitting them to do that, we got 9/11, that disaster, that horrific event. That is a major lesson learned. When we find radical Islamists in a safe haven, a sanctuary, we have got to pounce on them. And that is what Nichols did, the general in charge over there. He recognized that they tried to do it with infantry forces, took casualties. If I keep doing that, the casualties are just going to rise. What's the biggest thing I can do to take this thing down? Air Force had an answer for him, and he made the right decision here. He broke the back of that safe haven that ISIS has in Afghanistan. That's good news for the people of Afghanistan, certainly, and the Afghan military, and also for us, because ISIS is an out-of-region organization. They are after Western civilization's values, and they intend to do everything they can to destroy it. So
with the U.S. giving so much aid to Pakistan as well. So let's talk a bit about North Korea. A lot of people eyes on North Korea for this weekend, a very unstable place right now. What do you see as the U.S. role? What can President Trump do, and also working in accord with the president of China, President Xi?
Yeah, well, a couple of things here. First of all, the strike carrier group, their mission is really to reassure South Korea, reassure Japan that we have got their back, that things have changed. That's why Secretary Mattis has been out to the region, Secretary Tillerson's been out to the region, and obviously President Trump has met with some of the key leaders from the region. So that's number one. Obviously, the strike carrier group sends a message to the North Koreans and the Chinese, reminding them of the significant military options that the United States has in its toolkit here. And this is about as significant as it gets. Secondly, the phone call from President Xi on Wednesday night to President Trump following up to the Mar-a-Lago weekend bilateral meetings is incredibly significant. President Xi told President Trump that I'm willing, it's an hour-long conversation, longer because of interpreters to be sure, but he told him that I am willing to move in the direction of denuclearizing North Korea. That is a stunning statement. 3 presidents prior to President Trump have tried to get the Chinese to do the same thing, 20 plus years of it, and it has failed miserably. If this turns into action, and it's not just rhetoric, then President Trump had made a major geopolitical achievement to make the world a safer place. We have to see action behind those words.
Absolutely, and that's one of the areas that many analysts feel is of greatest concern and threat to the United States is that instability and that dictatorship in North Korea. So where do you think at this point now President Trump should be focusing his attention, because he's got a lot of irons in the fire? Syria, what should we be doing about Bashar al-Assad?
Well, the Bashar al-Assad situation in Syria is really a tough situation because we squandered all the opportunities, Kimberly, over the last number of years to really make a difference and to change momentum against the regime. The regime is solidified and consolidated. Now, we got to be honest about it. The Russians and the Iranians have propped up Assad. The Alawite regime is not going anyplace. And all the rhetoric that we're going to find a political solution, it's not happening. Assad may be a liability personally because he's reckless, and Putin would trade him out for another Alawite leader, also a thug, I would assume, and we wouldn't make much progress. But bringing that situation to an accommodation where the Syrian people are going to feel good about it, it's not going to happen. We're going to go focus on ISIS. That's what we should do. We should defeat ISIS in eastern Syria. We've got to get that done. Let's get that cleaned up. And then after that, we may be able to have some influence in the Syrian civil war. I don't believe we should get in the middle of it. I think that would be a disaster. But we have squandered the options, and it's tragic because we got 500,000 people dead. We've got 4 million refugees, and that killing is still going to go on.
You're right. It's become so much worse, in terms of an intractable problem because the Iranians and the Russians were able to move into those key air bases and those fields, and so it really complicates the problem from, a mission perspective in terms of what you can do and what targets you can hit, and we saw that just most recently. General Jack Keane, I could talk to you all night. I want to thank you so much for being here and for your service.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, Kimberly. It's good seeing you.
Thank you so much. Coming up next, right here on this special edition of Hannity.
It's stunning. Obama's own principals, their own secretaries, talk about NSC meetings that last for 3 to 4 hours with nobody taking a decision. That was the last 8 years. That was the reality of the red lines.
Special Counselor to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, explains the difference between the current Commander-in-Chief and Barack Obama. Rick Grinnell is here next with reaction, and later, the U.S. military has released video of the massive mother-of-all-bombs non-nuclear strike on ISIS tunnels that killed 36 jihadists in Afghanistan. Retired Brigadier General Tony Tata and Michael Waltz join us next. That and more as this special edition of Hannity, the Trump Doctrine, continues. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, the Trump Doctrine. President Trump's foreign policy approach is much different than that of Barack Obama. Listen to how Special Counselor to the President, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, describes it.
If you read the memoirs of Secretary Gates, of Secretary Panetta, it's stunning. Obama's own principals, their own secretaries, talk about NSC meetings that last for 3 to 4 hours with nobody taking a decision. That was the last 8 years. That was the reality of the red lines. Along comes President Trump. That's gone. We have a threat. We've promised to deal with it, and we're dealing with it right now.
We are seeing what Dr. Gorka is talking about play out with North Korea, and here's President Trump taking a tough stance with the rogue regime over nuclear weapons.
North Korea is a problem. The problem will be taken care of. I will say this. I think China has really been working very hard.
Here with reaction is former spokesman for the United States Ambassador to the UN, Rick Grinnell. Rick, thanks for being with us tonight. So many people mind a focus on North Korea, what might happen next. Do you believe that the president is correct to rely on China so heavily with North Korea?
Absolutely. I think China is the key here, and we haven't been successful in breaking through with China to get them to understand that this is an important issue for us. And it makes sense because China is not threatened by North Korea, so it's not a priority for the Chinese government. However, this meeting between Trump and Xi down at Mar-a-Lago, I think, was timed perfectly, and something happened that I have never seen in diplomacy in all my years, and that was Donald Trump made perfectly clear to President Xi that we are willing to use all the tools in the tool belt of the U.S. government in order to accomplish our foreign policy goals. What he said to the president of China was this: you are going to get a better trade deal from us if you help us out on North Korea. Now, Kimberly, I've been inside the Security Council sitting across from the Russians and the Chinese for almost a decade, and we U.S. diplomats usually are forced to make moral arguments. We say to the Russians, we say to the Chinese, you must do the right thing because it's what the international community says you should do, or it's in your best interest. We are not very good at linking commerce or agriculture or treasury and banking issues. Donald Trump has made it perfectly clear that in order for the Chinese to get a very good trade deal, which they care about, they're going to have to do something on North Korea. That was a brilliant move, and it happened to be something new that diplomats seldom, if ever, do.
You know, you just wonder about that because it makes such sense, this kind of strategic diplomacy, bargaining to make sure to say, if you want this, we have some mutual interests, but this is something that's important to us and we need you to step up in terms of exerting pressure. It seems like, wow, why wasn't this done before? And why didn't the Barack Obama administration do anything to kind of further stabilize the area, that area of the region and with North Korea?
Right. It's exactly, I think, as you say, it seems common sense. But it's common sense for a businessman. It's common sense for people outside of Washington. It's not common sense for politicians. Remember, Donald Trump is very proud of being flexible.
Yes.
And being somebody who is flexible in negotiations. That is what Americans want to see. For politicians, that's a bad word. Most people in Washington, D.C. mock and ridicule somebody who is flexible. In business, you go in with a position that is stated very clearly as what your goal is, but you realize when someone across the table doesn't have the same goal that you have to bargain. You have to be flexible. That is 101 of business, but it is not something that politicians value, and I think that that's why Washington is having such a hard time with Donald Trump's style.
What I'm wondering at this hour is, you know, can we trust China? Can the United States trust their government and really count on them to get this done?
Well, let me put it this way. We can trust that China wants a really good trade deal, that they care about the economy. They're having a tough time when they look at a long-term economic plan for China. There are, a lot of poor people in China. There's a lot of very concerning economic situations on the horizon for China. There are UNICEF, UN workers inside China helping them feed their people. So the one thing that we can be confident of is that China cares about economic issues, and therefore when we tie those economic issues to the fact that they've got to help us on North Korea, then I think we're getting their attention. Don't forget, Kimberly, that after their meeting in Mar-a-Lago, President Xi went back to China and moved 175,000 troops to the Chinese border with North Korea. That is a signal that he understands what's going on. He saw Syria, and he also understands that he's got to put pressure on the North Koreans because Donald Trump has a credible threat of military action.
Yes, and President Trump has now made it the equivalent of diplomatic skin in the game for China to achieve the goals that they want with respect to trade. Very well explained. Thank you so much, Rick. Coming up, the U.S. military has released video of the mother of all bombs, non-nuclear strike on ISIS tunnels in Afghanistan that killed 36 terrorists. Retired Brigadier General Tony Tata and Michael Waltz join us next. And later,
the border is not open. Please don't come. You will be apprehended if you do come, and you will be deported promptly. And if you're a criminal, you'll be prosecuted.
U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions tells illegal immigrants that the southern border is now closed. Richard Fowler and former Sheriff Paul Babu will weigh in. Stay with us as this special edition of Hannity, The Trump Doctrine, continues.
Good evening, and live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. Chaos at New York City's Penn Station. Police say an unruly passenger is responsible for this scramble right here. A human stampede started after a man was tased by Amtrak police after getting off a train, which had been stuck in a tunnel for more than 2 hours. People mistaking the tasing for an active shooter. Police say 13 people were injured. 2 people were taken into custody. And an Arkansas judge is now blocking the state from using a lethal injection drug in its upcoming execution of 6 men. Actor Johnny Depp joining protests of the planned executions, which are to start Monday night. The state was rushing them because its supply of a sedative used in the protocol is due to expire by the end of April. Arkansas has not executed an inmate since 2005 because of drug shortages and lethal challenges. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Hannity on this very busy news night.
Welcome back to the special edition of Hannity, the Trump Doctrine. Yesterday, the Trump administration sent a strong message to ISIS by dropping what's called the, quote, mother of all bombs on ISIS tunnels in Afghanistan. And today, the U.S. military released video of the massive non-nuclear blast and details of the mission, saying 36 ISIS fighters were killed in the strike. President Trump is also reacting to the major show of force in the fight against ISIS. Watch this.
Very, very proud of the people. Really another successful job. We're very, very proud of our military. Everybody knows exactly what happened. And what I do is I authorize my military. We have the greatest military in the world, and they've done a job as usual. So we have given them total authorization, and that's what they're doing. And frankly, that's why they've been so successful lately. If you look at what's happened over the last 8 weeks and compare really to what's happened over the last 8 years, you'll see there's a tremendous difference.
Joining us now with reaction is the author of Besiege, retired Brigadier General Tony Tata, and retired U.S. Army Special Forces Officer Michael Waltz. Thanks for being with us tonight, gentlemen, to discuss the Trump Doctrine, and want to discuss what happened in Afghanistan, the fight against ISIS. Give me your best shot at what kind of impact you think this bomb will have on ISIS in Afghanistan, General.
Well, Kimberly, great to be with you. I really think the Trump Doctrine is one of peace through strength. It's very Reagan-esque. When I think back to Jimmy Carter and Reagan coming in and the hostages being held by Iran and not released until Reagan was sworn in, it's pretty much the same thing. I think all around the world people are beginning to recognize that we are a powerful country. We're not passive anymore. We're not going to be bowing down to our enemies and apologizing. We're going to assert our strength. And so Mick Nicholson, the general in Afghanistan, made a tactical decision to drop this mother of all bombs on this rat line that goes into Pakistan, but it has strategic implications. And part of the elements of power at play here, sure, we've got the military destroying ISIS in Pakistan and on the Afghan border. And we're also using information. That's the big reason that this video is being released is because it's an information play to show the world what we can do, much like we did with the Tomahawks and the cruise missiles in Syria. So lots of elements of national power at play, political, diplomatic, informational, military, all coming together to have peace through strength. And we've got to fight our way out of this hole that the Obama administration dug us into.
It's like catching up, with a huge deficit at halftime and needing to come back with a big win. Michael, what else do you think that we need to do in Afghanistan to fight against ISIS and even al-Qaeda for that matter?
Well, Kim, I just wanted to add to General Tata's comment there. There's been a lot of discussion on what message the cruise missiles, the dropping of the Moab sends. And what's key is that the commander on the ground did not have to mother may I back to Washington to use the appropriate ordinance. And that sends a critical message to the U.S. military that your commander-in-chief trusts you. He recognizes that you're the best trained and equipped military in the world, and he's not going to have him or his staff second-guessing you from Washington. There was story after story from Panetta, from Gates, from Hagel, Obama's secretaries of defense, of National Security Council staffers calling commanders in the field and second-guessing their strategy and their tactical moves. There was this kind of obsession with civilian casualties. And look, I can tell you as a commander, as a Green Beret, we all understand the implications of that on the ground. I don't need Washington calling and asking me about that. And then you had pilots, as ISIS is charging across Iraq, taking over the Middle East, and we finally engage our Air Force, and you had pilots coming back with their wings still on the bombs, with bombs still on the wings, and 75% of sorties not allowed to drop.
It's an unbelievable number.
Because we had this obsession with zero civilian casualties, and the irony there, as we all know, is ISIS went on and massacred tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians. So I think the overall message to the geopolitically is important, but the message to the U.S. military that we're going to let you do your job and that the commander-in-chief is going to be worried about strategy, what success looks like. Some of that is still developing, granted, but that the military is going to be allowed to do what it does best, and that we understand that diplomacy has to work hand in hand with military force in order for either one to work.
Yes, and General Tata, General Keane was on earlier, said the same thing, that, this is a big game changer for the U.S. military to say that, look, we're behind you. We have a president, commander-in-chief that's going to let you do the job, that's going to let you do the missions and make sure that you have the military might to back it up.
That's right, Kimberly. It's called commander's intent in the military, and when commander's intent is broad guidance that you want your subordinate commanders to execute, and you train them, and then they go forward and they execute your intent. And so the commander-in-chief's intent, President Trump's intent, is that we kill the enemies of this nation. There are threats everywhere. You look at Iran, you look at Syria, you look at Russia, you look at North Korea, you look at ISIS. Everywhere we turn, that we're being crowded by our enemies, to whom we've apologized or given billions of dollars.
Wow.
And now we're trying to fight our way out of this thing. Pakistan, you name it, ISIS is there.
Sure.
And so suddenly what we've got to do is fight our way out of this thing and reestablish our preeminence so that we can protect our liberties, protect our vital interests, and plan properly with the National Security Council now looking at ends, ways, and means, and taking a hard look at U.S. vital interests, threats to those vital interests, calling Islamic extremism a threat, and then actually attacking that threat to try to eliminate it so that we can live freely for an enduring time period.
All right, fantastic. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with me tonight, and have a wonderful Easter and Passover weekend. And coming up next, right here on this special edition of Hannity.
The border is not open. Please don't come. You will be apprehended if you do come, and you will be deported promptly. And if you're a criminal, you'll be prosecuted.
U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the southern border is now closed as President Trump moves forward with his plans to build a wall. Richard Fowler and former Sheriff Paul Babu are here with reaction, and later.
We will end the political correctness and foster free and respectful dialogue.
That was then candidate Donald Trump blasting political correctness. He's continued to do so as president. Charlie Kirk and Jessica Tarlov will be here later.
Somebody said, oh, Trump's not going to build the wall. I'm going to build the wall 100%. In fact, we had hundreds of bidders. We have many, many designs. I've seen 10 of the top, but I want to see more. And what I'm doing is I said to our very great secretary, he's really doing a great job, General Kelly, because you see the numbers where they're down 68%. Nobody's ever seen numbers. It's like a record. In fact, people aren't even trying to get through anymore because they know they can't.
That was President Trump talking with Maria Bartiromo about his plans for the border wall. And earlier this week here on Hannity, Attorney General Jeff Sessions told Sean the border is no longer open. Take a look.
The most important thing for us is to send a message to the world that the border is not open. Please don't come. You will be apprehended if you do come, and you will be deported promptly. And if you're a criminal, you'll be prosecuted. And if you assault our officers, we're going to come at you with a ton of bricks. This is the kind of message we need to send. It's already being sent. It's having a dramatic impact so far.
Joining me now is Fox News contributor Richard Fowler and former Pinal County, Arizona Sheriff Paul Babu. Gentlemen, thanks for being here tonight. Lots of news this week, but first off to you, has the Trump administration done a good job so far in terms of signaling that it is a new era and illegal immigration will not be tolerated, Sheriff?
Absolutely. Wow, what a strong, powerful message from Attorney General Sessions. Not just the words, but followed up with actions. He's actually directing all U.S. attorneys to target and prosecute criminal illegals, those who are repeat offenders, continue to come into this country illegally, and hiring an additional 125 immigration judges where this whole backlog could be solved, and deport these criminals who really pose a risk to our entire community. This is all after President Trump has actually taken executive actions and actually ordering the enforcement of the law. And you've seen these executive orders roll out, and it ends catch and release, which was the rule of the day under Obama.
Yeah, sure was.
And then also targeting the million criminal illegals throughout the country that law enforcement are going to work together to target them, to apprehend them, and then to deport them for good. And then, of course, the signature is to build the Great Wall. And the president himself has personally been reviewing these plans. We know him as a great builder, and this is going to be done. These are no longer promises. They're not campaign speeches. We're seeing action resulting, evidenced in 70% now reduction in illegal entries crossing the border.
A huge number drop. All right, Richard, you got a lot to work with right there. So where do you want to begin?
A couple points. I think what we know for a fact is over the past 20 years, we've seen a decrease in border crossing. And there's research and studies on that from the Border Patrol. But beyond that point is we know this. So in President Trump's budget, he's sort of allocated $51 billion to go to build this so-called unpractical, unrealistic, and I would argue un-American wall. But this money is being taken away from American students who need textbooks in the city of Detroit, or American students in the city of Chicago who don't have heat in their classrooms because the Department of Education is taking a 14% cut. So we've got to really have a conversation with ourselves as Americans, is how we balance protecting our border, quote unquote, and making sure that we're enriching our future, right? If we really want to, quote unquote, make America great again, then let's invest in America's kids. Let's invest, which is our greatest resource. And I would go further, Kimberly, to make one other point about this sort of Trump era and this Trump Justice Department. I don't ascribe to it because I find a lot of their policies to be taking our country backwards instead of moving us forwards as we should be. We're a nation of immigrants, and we have 11 million of them here living in the shadows, and we need to do everything in our power to make sure that we deal with those undocumented immigrants and provide them a pathway to citizenship.
Well, you know, Richard, well stated, but we were also a nation of laws, and I worked as a prosecutor in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and I saw repeated abuses, the laws that were not followed, dangerous things that happened in sanctuary cities like San Francisco. And what's wrong with actually enforcing the laws that are on the books currently,
I have
Richard?
no problem. I have no problem enforcing the laws that are currently on the books, right? And I have no problem in deporting people who are axe murderers, rapists, and child abusers. But what we see under Donald Trump's America is you're deporting people who haven't paid their traffic tickets. There was a story a couple. No, that's actually true. You could pull the Miami Herald story. There's a Haitian national who was deported from Miami because he did not pay his traffic tickets. Point blank, period. And that's just one example.
Okay,
if I could say,
you got like 2 seconds, Paul. Go ahead.
Certainly. He gave this whole speech about America. The United States has a proud history of accepting legal immigrants. We accept 1 million a year legally. And how about putting Americans and our citizens, as the president has promised, first?
Absolutely.
Instead of the lawlessness that's gone on under Obama.
We're going to have to leave it right there. Always interesting. And coming up next, right here on the special edition of Hannity.
We will end the political correctness and foster free and respectful dialogue.
That was candidate Donald Trump criticizing political correctness. He's been doing the same thing as president. Charlie Kirk and Jessica Tarlov are here next to weigh in. That and much more as Hannity continues.
In the past few decades, political correctness, oh, what a terrible term, has transformed our institutions of higher education from ones that fostered spirited debate to a place of extreme censorship where students are silenced for the smallest of things. You say a word somewhat differently and all of a sudden you're criticized, sometimes viciously. We will end the political correctness and foster free and respectful dialogue.
That was a flashback to then candidate Donald Trump promising to fight back against political correctness at America's colleges and universities. And for good reason. This month alone, we've seen protests at Notre Dame over a scheduled commencement speech from Vice President Mike Pence because it's making some students feel, quote, unsafe. Also this month, at California's Claremont McKenna College, a speech by Heather McDonald was disrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters who physically blocked the entrances to her event. And now, at Duquesne University, some members of the Student Government Association are working to block a Chick-fil-A from coming to campus out of concerns over, quote, student safety. So, how can President Trump work to change this culture at America's universities? Joining us now from Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, and Democratic strategist and director of research at Bustle.com, Jessica Tarlov. Thank you both for being here with us tonight to discuss this. Boy, you know, you look at the news cycle and you see these stories happening over and over again. And I guess the first question would be is, you know, what causes this liberal groupthink mentality in higher education? It seems quite pervasive, Jessica.
I think a lot of it obviously has to do with the professors themselves, and I think it does start there. We know that majority of professors are liberal, and I don't think necessarily there has to be anything wrong with that. I think that what we need to get back to understanding is really what the First Amendment is all about. And I think that when you have protests at some of these speeches, that's fine. Violence, never fine. Maybe blocking the doors, going too far. But the complication for me with all of this is that when it distracts from actual issues of hate speech or racism, we saw this last year in the big story at the University of Missouri. There were actual incidents going on, and then you had that professor who said, we need some muscle in here. And it complicated the issue, and the national story became about her and not what was actually going on that campus. So there is a middle ground, and it's incredibly important we listen to the other side here. But I think that it has to start with the professors and also the national dialogue.
You know, Charlie, it just seems to me you're supposed to go to education, you know, get a great education in college, have an open mind, listen to other people's viewpoints, as Jessica is saying, but it's really what we're seeing is this movement of just stamping down diversity of thought and opinion to a groupthink that isn't healthy for America's youth.
That's right. And Jessica brings a great point. This actually does the far left-wing campus activists a disservice when they want to point out real hate speech on campus. I mean, trying to bring a Chick-fil-A to campus is all of a sudden considered dangerous and unsafe. What are they worried that
it's so fattening, Charlie.
delicious chicken sandwiches are going to make student unsafe? Essentially, they're saying is we disagree with the owners of Chick-fil-A, therefore it shouldn't be opened on campus. And so look, you bring up a great point about diversity, and you know, one of the students at Notre Dame that was protesting the potential visit for commencement speech for Vice President Pence, he had a sign, he said, diversity is our strength. I agree, but it should be intellectual diversity is our strength. You know, racial diversity is great, but we need to get back to being able to entertain ideas that you don't agree with, and our colleges are not fostering those discussions. And unfortunately, you know, Notre Dame's one of the greatest schools in the country, and to have students even given an audience to say we shouldn't have the Vice President of the United States because we disagree with him, I don't think that's what college is supposed to be about, and I think Jessica agrees with that. And I don't believe it's good for the country, it's good for the dialogue to continue to silence people you'll disagree with, that on these campuses there's no more diversity of thought, and I think it's a dangerous precedent to be set.
Yeah, it really is. You know, and I encourage people to go and speak at universities, Jessica, to have this open dialogue. I've spoken at Cornell, and it was well received. They're better than poor Jesse Waters was, who's booted off campus. But it makes no sense to me. And I come from San Francisco, you know, very liberal, very, open-minded place. UC Davis, so, you know, familiar with the UC system. It wasn't like that then. This has gotten so out of hand that it worries me that we're sending our youth and they're coming out of college like ill-prepared to deal with the reality of life. Nobody's going to give you a cuddle blanket.
Well, you can't pick your coworkers, right? You're going to go and you're going to get a job, and there are going to be people there who think things that are different from you. I know last year we also saw that Jason Riley was disinvited from being at UVA. We had issues with Ray Kelly, former New York City Police Commissioner. I think that was at Brown. The most useful thing that you can do, I believe strongly, and I come on here and I talk to people who are conservatives all the time because I think it's the best use of my time to put out my viewpoint in this what I see as arguably constructive way, is to make sure that you show up and you present your rationale and your case so that the most amount of people can hear what you have to say. So go to those rallies, go to those speeches, raise your hand, get called on, submit a question, write a letter to the editor in papers. But don't get violent and don't distract from this, because I think that the liberals, and maybe this is not, you know, the far, far left, we have important things to say about the dangers of the Trump administration and many of these policies, about what Mike Pence believes. You can pick them apart on on policy. But it's really important to show up and be constructive about it, to move forward.
I think it's such great advice. And Charlie, what's your advice for kids out there, conservatives, students that want to go to a university? What should they do?
Well, so, you know, I'm a big fan of students trying to go to schools like Hillsdale and the more conservative schools. But if you're a conservative, don't be afraid to go to the very liberal schools and stand up for what you believe in. And be the champions of free speech. As Jessica noted, you know, that's something that is not always being fought for today on our college campuses, and it's being eroded quickly. And look, you have to be able to not just fight for what you want to say, but also fight for things you might not want to hear. That's what free speech is all about. And what's going on in the campuses right now is that the administrators and the faculty are encouraging some very far left-wing activist voices to silence conservatives. And I pose the question to liberals on campus, if you're so confident in what you believe in, shouldn't you want more conservatives on campus so you can prove them wrong?
Yes,
you know, why try to shut them up? Why try to disprove them? Encourage more conservative voices and then show them why they're so wrong. Don't try to storm the stage. Don't try to block the door. Don't try to riot or do dangerous protests, or even in the sense of Duquesne University, don't try to shut down a private business. I think that's so deconstructive to what college is supposed to be.
It totally is, but I think that it also is beholden to conservatives to play a part in this and to call out what is more towards hate speech. You know, when they're kind of all people, you know, from the alt-right. I think it's important to distinguish between what is just conservatism, a relatively safe ideology, as it were, certainly in terms of, you know, the more mainstream Republicans, to separate that from the Richard Spencers of the world. You know,
right. Chick-fil-A is not hate speech, though, and that so it totally delegitimizes these activists to say Chick-fil-A must be gone because it's hate speech. Vice President Pence because it's hate speech. Heather McDonald because it's hate speech.
I've moved on from the chicken, but there are voices out there that are dangerous.
Missing out on all that tasty chicken. They're lost. But yes, if you can get a Pence or a Condoleezza Rice or a Petraeus to show up at your school and give a speech, come on, you're pretty lucky. You should open your ears and your mind and listen. All right, we listened to you two. We've made a great start tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Kimberly.
And coming up, more of the special edition of Hannity, the Trump Doctrine. Stay with us.